So yeah, first tips for getting back into running, know yourself, right? Like, why did you stop? Figure that out first. Why do you want to get back into it? Figure that out too, because you're not going to get anywhere until you know those two things. Then there's a good book, Switch. Yeah, I think it's called Switch. Something Heath, I think is the author's name, like Chip Heath or something like that. I think it might be written by brothers. I'm babbling. But it's a really good book about, the subtitle is How to Change When Change is Hard or something like that. And I really like that, so I'd recommend checking that out. It talks about this analogy that I've heard before elsewhere of motivation and changing behavior change, that's it. Thinking about the elephant, the rider, and the path. And I think that's a really cool way of thinking. That I always think about this because I knew what had happened with the running. I knew the elephant, the rider, and the path were all knackered, right? So the elephant is your sort of emotional self, right? So they say you've got to motivate the elephant because the elephant decides where you go. That's your emotions. That decides what you do, okay? The rider is your intellectual self. So you can influence the elephant, but you can't directly control it. So you can sort of persuade it and guide it. But with your intellectual self, you're always going to be governed by the emotional self. If you, I mean, this is just the way we are, right? We make our decisions emotionally and we rationalize them intellectually, right? That's what they say. So what's the elephant? What's the motivation? So for me, it was the goal, right? Initially, it was the marathon. Then it was under 4 hours for the marathon. Then it was getting into triathlon, completing the Xterra. The following year, it was to do my first half marathon. So that half Ironman, sorry. So motivate the elephant, right? What's the motivation? Yours is maybe completely different, right? You didn't mention specifically why you want to get back into running, but figure that out because you need to know how to motivate the elephant. I think is it direct the rider, they say, or something like that, but it's like, okay, I know my motivation. Now, how am I going to approach this from an intellectual point of view? So what's my plan, essentially? So for me, I needed a training plan, right? I needed, a 16-week plan that builds me up from where I'm at to where I want to be. So I know what to do. And then the last one is shape the path. And that one I really like because I think this is one that, me and everyone else, we often forget when we have, habits that we want to adopt or behavior change that we want to embrace that will make us better. Do you know what I mean? It's like we want to change change our behavior so we are happier with our life, I guess. Shaping the path means controlling the environment so you don't sabotage yourself. So if you look at my environment when I was away and I completely fell off the training path, it was too hot, it was uncomfortable. I could only run in a very narrow window during the morning, and that window was often taken up by this sort of online work I was doing because I could only do that at that time of day because it was the only time that was comfortable enough for me to do it. And then when we went to India, it was extremely, I could have been as motivated as hell, but the roads were so bad, it was dangerous. The environment did not allow me to pursue the behavior change that I wanted to pursue in any way. Then when I got home, the environment got a lot better. My habits, my daily routine returned, the weather was better, the climate was more comfortable to run in. So try not to let things, and try and set up your environment so it doesn't get in your way. Try and set up your environment so it actually assists you in the behavior change that you're trying to adopt. So you might think, like I've heard the suggestion of, if you find it difficult to get out of bed and run before work in the morning, it's like, okay, well, put your running clothes right by your bed, all ready to go. So you sit up on the edge of your bed and you get dressed straight away. Or for me, it's like make the workout part of the commute. I think that's a huge one. That really helps me. So I live about 6 or 7K from work. So it can be a good time to get in bike rides or runs. I often make I'll be like, I'll ride to the pool, I'll swim, and I'll ride from there to work. And I just set out that hour and a half or whatever I need. And even though it's like quite a bit of like, I don't feel like I need to be motivated to do that, because that's what I do on a Wednesday morning. It's like, well, I get up at this time, and it's all set up in advance, so I know what to do and have my gear ready for me, and I know what time to leave and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, motivate the elephant, direct the rider, shape the path. So that's, what's your motivation? Why do you want to do it? Figure that out. Direct the rider, have a plan and a strategy, and write it down maybe, and then shape the path. Are there things that are just getting in the way, making it harder than it needs to be? Make it as easy as it can be in terms of your environment. If there's things that always interrupt, like a lot of people intend to start going to the gym, say it's New Year, right? So they're very motivated. The elephant's very motivated to go to the gym. So, it's New Year. Someone wants to lose weight. They want to get in shape. They're extremely motivated. So the elephant is good to go. And maybe they've got a plan. They're like, I'm going to go to the gym, and I'm going to go 5 times a week every day after work, right? Then the environment they haven't considered. So what is the situation like as you leave work? Okay, are you knackered usually? Are you just ready to go home and just chill? Is the traffic bad? Does that stress you out and make you less inclined to go to the gym? Do things come up? Do you sometimes have to stay late, right? Which means that you're more tired and less inclined to go to the gym. Do you sometimes get called to do other things like run errands for your kids or pick so-and-so up or do something for your partner, right? That can easily sabotage the habit, right? So then instead of going 5 times a week, you find you can only get there like 3 times a week on average because of all the environmental stuff that's sort of sabotaging you. And then that affects the motivation, right? Because you're like, I'm not doing it. I said I was going to do it, right? And then once the elephant's tapped out, you're done. You can't change your behavior. You're stuck now. So that's why I think a lot of people, and that's why I have fallen off in the past with my training objectives or things like goals and stuff that I've set for myself and I've not done. But it's actually the environment wasn't set up in my favor. It wasn't supporting me. And then there's a good book called The Power of Habit, and that talks about how, if you do something for about 4 to 6 weeks every day, it becomes a habit and it becomes a lot more automatic. And I certainly believe this. Like if you keep something up every day, then it becomes harder to not do it. So, working out every day in some form is just part of my routine. And then I sometimes take Monday off if I want to. So then when I don't do that, I really notice it, and it feels weird. And especially because it's part of my commuting, usually it's like, well, why would I not do it? Do you know what I mean? And something like my bike was out of commission last week and I couldn't really do it. So I was like, well, sorry, that just made something else occur to me. This is a long and rambly podcast. Hopefully it's answering your question. I definitely got sidetracked going into the psychology stuff a little bit more. It just occurred to me that I fell off with my biking a little bit just after my half Ironman race a couple of weeks ago. One, because I wasn't as motivated because I knew my next race wasn't for a whole year, right? The other is I didn't have a plan, so my rider wasn't directed because I didn't have a training plan set up for right after the race. I didn't have a plan for anything after the race, so for 2 weeks I was just kind of resting. And then number 3, my brakes on my bike broke, and I was like, I'm going to fix them myself. And then I'm a complete idiot and I'm a bit incompetent. So they're still not fixed. I'm supposed to do it today. But because I was riding my mountain bike to work, and I didn't want to ride my road bike to work because of all the pavements going up and down and that kind of stuff. And I didn't want to stay on the road because the roads that lead me to work are very busy. I didn't have a an environment that was supporting the habit of biking to work, right? And then after about a week, I was getting sick of it, and I was like, right, I'm going to figure out a way to ride to work on my road bike that I feel safe. And so I went online and I mapped out a good route. And after I did it once, I did it like every day since. So I was getting 2 hours, like an hour into work and an hour ride back from work every single day, because I just found this new route, and now my environment is supporting my habit. And then the habit becomes, I bike to work on my road bike, and I do it every day. And now it's easy, right? It just sort of does itself. So I would say, you know, thinking about the elephant, the rider, and the path, and then think about building the habit. It's like, okay, I know it's going to be a little tricky for the next 4 to 6 weeks, but I need some sort of habit. So I do it this day, this is what I do. And I've considered the elephant, rider, and path in setting up that habit. Check both those books out. If this is to do with, if you stop because of, you know, motivation and that kind of stuff, then I would check both those books out. They're really good. If you stop for more, like if you got an injury or something like that, then let me know and I will talk about that injury. But that brings me to, if you've got everything in place, so you've got your elephant, your rider, your environment, your habits, all set up, you've given that all some thought, then you just need to think about, how do I get back into running without getting injured, right? So I encourage people to think about, what's your baseline, right? This is a little bit of it's a fluid concept. It's difficult to know exactly, but my baseline is about 20k per week. And what I mean by that is that typically when I've had periods off running and then getting back into running, I know as long as it hasn't been too long and I'm not completely out of shape, and you know, a year is fine. Like I said, in 2018, I barely ran at all. If I stick to about 20k a week, then I probably won't get injured and I'll feel okay. And I can get back to 20k a week quite easily without too much stress. And that's me, and that's not to say that that's great. Like some people will jump back in. I have a friend in Ottawa who like takes like 3 months off, and then he'll do like 30k runs at the weekend and run 2 or 3 times during the week. Do you know what I mean? It's like, some people have a different baseline. My baseline seems to be about 20k. If I go back too quickly and go over 20k a week, my feet start to hurt. I start to get niggles in my Achilles. The knees start to hurt. You know, that kind of stuff. I just start to get niggles. My body telling me, yeah, the rate of change is too great. You need to slow down a little bit. So I would think about, Celia, do you know what your baseline is? Do you know how much running you could get back to reasonably quickly and not be too concerned about injury? So that might be like 3k per week, you know, it might be 40k per week. It really depends on your running history. And if this is 1 year off out of 20 years of consistent running, you're gonna have a much higher baseline than if this is 1 year off after you ran for 6 months and that's when you first got into it. And I don't know that based on your question. So that would really affect how quickly you would get, how high your baseline volume is per week. So the first thing you're gonna do is work out what you think your baseline is. And then you're gonna give yourself sort of 4 to 6 weeks to build back up to baseline. Okay? And that just means just listening to your body, taking days off when you need to, not having any of your runs be too long, and spreading the weekly volume out among lots of little runs. And I would say running a minimum of 4 times a week, because if you take 10k and spread it over 4 runs, so you've got like, I don't know, 2.5k on each run, you're much less likely to get injured than if you have 2 runs, you spread the 10k over 2 runs, and it's like a 7 and a 3, right? You're much more likely to get injured with that kind of strategy. Okay, so pick your baseline weekly volume, spread it out over at least 4 runs, 5 maybe would be better, and then build up to that. Say that's my target, and I'm going to slowly build up to that over, let's say, 4 weeks. Okay, so the first week I'm going to do, 3k, next week 5k, 7k, 10k is my baseline. I'm back to that on week 4. It's spread out over 3 to 5 runs. Okay. The other thing I'd recommend until you get back to baseline. Well, get back to baseline and then do another 2 to 4 weeks of baseline. And that's, keeping your volume the same to give yourself sort of at least 2 months of relatively comfortable volume. And during that time, I would go all easy. And this is a little controversial. It depends a little bit on the elephant rider and environment situation. So if you find, going to the running room or the run collective or something like that and doing hill repeats and sprint intervals and things like that, workouts with those guys, because it's really motivating for you and because that's a good habit for you and because you really enjoy it, then I might be a little more flexible on this. But I would say if that's not a big concern and you're just trying to set things up to make sure you don't get injured as optimally as you can, I would keep everything easy, because typically the stress is higher when it comes to things like hills and sprints, and the easy stuff is easier for your tissues to adapt to. So trying to keep things easy for the first 1 to 2 months, at least in the majority, like 90% plus easy, would be another strategy I'd recommend. And then I think that's it for that question. So any follow-up questions on that part, let me know. Next we're going to tackle how to tone the body and overall strengthen the body, but we'll get to that in the next episode.